I grew up watching wrestling with my dad, and I can remember he took me to a match one time, and it was really built up that this guy was going to wrestle a bear. And so, of course, I was about 7 or 8 years old, I think, and I kept thinking, it's going to be a costume, but we got there, and it was a real bear. Of course, they had him so, stuff all over him where, that guy just kind of did this. But anyway, Landon was a wrestling fanatic. I mean, he had all the action figures, the WWF, belt, the Hulk Hogan costume. In fact, I took him, Keith and I took the boys several times, to see Hulk Hogan, and y'all remember the Undertaker, Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, can't remember who else, but Steve Austin, yes. And there's a group of them, I can't think of their names, that are from this part of the world. There's like Von Erichs and the Funks, yeah. Randy Savage, yeah. But Deanna asked me here a while back, she said, you need to do a sermon on wrestling with God, so this is this one sermon, because I'm being totally honest, I've wrestled with God every day since Landon passed away. And encountering God is not always a gentle experience. But sometimes faith requires wrestling with our doubts and our hardships. Now, wrestling with God isn't necessarily a bad thing. Think about this. It means that we embrace God. We all, every one of us, have wrestled with God at some point in our lives. You may be doing it right now. It's asking Him for what we want. It's persisting in prayer. It's crying out to Him. When we wrestle, we believe that our cries and our prayers matter. Now, maybe you can remember, I really can't, but back in the day in the gym when you used to kind of push yourself, to the point of pain and failure, but that was for the idea to build strength and endurance. But likewise, we know in our spiritual lives, God sometimes allows us to face situations that expose our weaknesses. But these limitations, they're not meant to defeat us. They're designed to bring us to a total dependency on God. I think if we're honest with ourselves, God isn't always who we want Him to be. He doesn't always do things the way we wish He would. That's true in the pages of the Bible, and it's true in our lives. I mean, when we bump into something about God that makes us uncomfortable, we have a choice. We can either ignore it or we can wrestle. And I'd rather wrestle with God and, like Jacob, end up with a limp than do nothing. So the next time we find ourselves wrestling with God, don't shy away from it. Embrace it. Engage it. Knowing that through it, God's not trying to break us. He's trying to bless us. Now I want you to turn to Psalm 77. The Psalms are full of wrestling matches with God, wrestling and questioning. And here in Psalm 77, we see Asaph here wrestling with God. In the context, verse 3 talks about, when I remember God, I'm disturbed. When I sigh, my spirit grows faint. You've held my eyelids open. I'm troubled that I cannot speak. So he's definitely, we see him wrestling with God. And then he asks 6 questions, beginning in verse 7. Will the Lord reject me forever? Question number 1. Will He never be favorable to me again? Number 2. Number 3, has God's loving kindness ceased forever? Number 4, has his promise come to an end forever? Number 5, has God forgotten to be gracious? Or has God shut up his compassion? And then he says in verse 10, that's my grief. And when we wrestle with these questions and with God, we tend to throw in, I know, some pretty big questions, and we blame him. I mean, other questions, right? God, why aren't you listening to me? God, why is this happening to me? Why is my life unfair? What's the purpose in all of this? Why did you, and you can fill in the blank. Now I know at times wrestling and questioning God can make us feel uncomfortable. I mean, to a point where we might think there's something even wrong with us or in our relationship with God. But I want us to know that's not so. It's not a sin to question God. Remember, both David and Jesus asked the same question, my God, why have you what? Forsaken me. Throughout the Bible, there's examples of people who've wrestled with God. Moses wrestled with God about his ministry. Remember, God put him in the wilderness for 40 years to prepare him for his ministry, and then God brings him out of the wilderness, and Moses is wrestling with God about 4 doubts he had. Remember, he said in Exodus 3 and 4, I'm a nobody. People won't believe me. I'm not a fluent speaker. Somebody else can do it better. And eventually, God wrestled the doubts out of Moses. Then again, think of David in the Psalms. David believed that his prayers mattered. I mean, he poured out his heart through tears, expecting God to answer. But most of David's Psalms of lament, they do eventually melt into praise. But it's because he wrestled through those situations. I mean, one example of that, Psalm 42, when he asked God, I think isn't it 4 times? Why are you in despair, O my soul? Why have you forgotten me? But then he ends that psalm by saying this, hope in God. Habakkuk. If you want to turn there real quick to chapter 3, Habakkuk. Remember, he begins his book questioning and struggling with God. When he says, how long, O Lord, will I cry? How long will I call for help? But you know, after wrestling with God over all those situations, Habakkuk is content to rest in God. And remember in chapter 3, he prays one of the greatest prayers, the greatest confessions of faith found in the Bible. I mean, his lips are trembling and his legs are shaking and his circumstances, they've gone from just bad to worse. And he says this, beginning in verse 16. I heard and my inward parts trembled. At the sound of my lips quivered. Decay entered my bones. In my place I trembled because I must wait quietly for the day of distress. Basically, God told him things are going to go from bad to worse. And he'd been praying and praying. And notice what he says, verse 17. The fig tree should not blossom. There's going to be no fruit on the tree, on the vine. Though the yield of the olive should fail, the fields produce no food. The flock should be cut off from the fold. They're going to be wondering, where are we going to be able to eat? What are we going to be able to eat? Yet, verse 18, look what he says. I exult in the Lord. I rejoice in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he makes my feet like hinds' feet, and makes me walk on high places. Habakkuk's circumstances didn't change, but through wrestling with God, it led him to believe that God's going to take him higher. 2 Corinthians 12:7 and following, remember Paul wrestles with the Lord about his thorn in the flesh. We see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane wrestling with God, Luke 22:42. Remember when he asked for the cup to be removed from him, and finally he says, "Not my will, but thine be done." And the most famous wrestling match in the Bible is found in Genesis 32, the one that Larry read from us. And I'm just going to make just a couple of comments about that because we've just finished studying the life of Jacob and we looked at all that. But he confronts his weaknesses, his sins, and all those things that are hurting him. And he faces God, and he clings to God. He refuses to let go, remember, till God will bless him. And after he blessed him, in chapter 32, verse 30, he says this, I've seen God face to face. Wrestling with God changed his identity. His name changed to Israel. And here's the thing, when God wrestles with us, there's always more going on than we realize. Ultimately, he's trying to change us, isn't he? And like Jacob, God might cause us to limp the rest of our lives in our faith. But that limp's a constant reminder that we wrestle with God. Now, wrestling requires close contact. And here's the thing, we cannot wrestle from a distance. And I'm talking about up close and personal contact. That's why I put that slide up there. That's the kind of contact I'm not comfortable with. I don't know about y'all. But wrestling with God means we get more of God. It means we're closer to God than we have ever been in our lives. And we may not be happy with God, but we don't have to in order to come close to Him. I mean, in fact, usually we wrestle because we're upset, right? I mean, trials have that strange way of bringing people closer together. And same's true with God. So when we're willing to wrestle with God through hard seasons and things that hurt us and are hard to understand, we will grow. How many rounds have you gone with God? And some may wrestle with God their entire lives until they get to heaven. I want to quickly just give us 7 reactions or thoughts as we wrestle with God. Number 1, wrestle with all of our strength. God doesn't want to hurt us, but He's going to go at us, test us to make us stronger. Don't hold back. Go at it with all we have. And I realize in some rounds of life, we don't have much strength. But use what we have. Number 2, wrestle with all our doubts. You know, at the core of the story of Jacob, Jacob had serious doubts about his future. Jacob was wrestling with his doubts about his identity, his people, his purpose, his future. But when God shows up, we don't have to hide our doubts. I mean, think about it. That's why we're wrestling with God, because we're doubting. Number 3, wrestle with honesty. There's no place for pretend spirituality. We don't hide things from God as we wrestle. Wrestling requires honesty, and wrestling is the purpose of finding honesty. In other words, it's kind of a self-awareness. You know, we spend so much of our lives not being honest with ourselves or self-aware, and that's why we have to wrestle with God. When we wrestle with God, folks, we're going to find out who we really are, what we need to be, and maybe why there's that gap between the two. Number 4, wrestle with humility. Humility and honesty, they're closely connected. Remember, God opposes the proud, gives grace to the humble. That's why we're wrestling. One way God opposes our pride is by wrestling it out of us. Number 5, wrestle with faith. We know our entire Christian life is a life of faith, and that includes wrestling. Faith that God is skilled enough to pound what needs pounding out of us, to humble what needs to be humbled, to ease up when He's hurting us too much, and God knows exactly what we need. Number 6, wrestle with hope. You remember Jacob wrestled all night? Why did he go so long? Why not just give up and get it over with? Why not just admit defeat and be done with it? It's because of hope. Jacob knew there was nothing else in life and nowhere else in life that he could find a future worth living. You know, premature surrender doesn't accomplish much. In fact, it leaves us in the same condition when we started. Don't walk away and quit. Hope is that mindset that believes God's not done with me yet. That evil and suffering, they don't have the last word. God does. And the last one, number 7, and this one sounds strange, but wrestle with love. God does. Not to defeat us, to strengthen us, to change us, to save us, to redirect us. We might start wrestling with God because we are ticked off. But you know what? Anger makes for some pretty good wrestling, doesn't it? Wrestle hard, but wrestle knowing our opponent loves us. And as we wrestle in love, we will find that we learn faster, and I think we get stronger more quickly, and God will bless us. Let me kind of close. 4 lessons we learn, I think, from wrestling with God, especially from the the story of Jacob. Number 1, we usually wrestle alone, and it's usually dark. It's in the dark when we do most of our wrestling, right? Number 2, wrestling can take a while, may take a lifetime. But number 3, the secret lies in not letting go. And number 4, wrestling with God will change our walk with Him. God's a God who longs to encounter us up close. And for us to be up close, sometimes we have to wrestle. And I know sometimes we feel like that picture, it's on my right. Is it on your right? Yes. That there's God and there's us. Let me ask us 3 questions. Will we be honest enough with God about our doubts and fears to wrestle with Him? Will we wrestle that directly, that persistently, that courageously? And then number 3, will we get on the mat and wrestle with God face to face? Because when the wrestling is over, we're going to find a relationship with God sweeter than ever before. One final note, and Drew, you can come lead us an invitation song. You know, when that bell rings for our life and that final round is over, you know, the good news is if we've wrestled with God, we're going to receive something better than that WWF World Championship belt, which, by the way, I Googled it. It's worth $1 million. We're going to receive a crown of life. And that, folks, is why we wrestle for that crown. Drew, come lead us in a song as we